Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Board Games Hitting My Table. So in this series I take a look and talk about all of the board games that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of April 2023. Now I've actually played mostly big box games in the last couple of weeks, so that's quite exciting to talk about. But before I get into the games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get cracking. And we're going to start with a two-player game of Teletum. So Teletum, the last time I did my top 10 of 2022, this was my number one game. I still feel that way. There is a couple more games that I need to talk about. But this one is a standout. I think this game is fantastic. The latest Tascini and Luciani co-design. And this one, despite being part of the T series of games, it does feel different because for me it feels like it's stripped back a lot of the complexity and the convolution of some of the more recent T series of games. This one is a very simple, it's still a dice drafter, and it does have a very quirky and cool twist on the dice drafting mechanism where if you are drafting a dice and with high pip values, you're going to get loads of that coloured resource, but you're going to get a weaker action and vice versa. So it's a nice little conundrum there to overcome. You're spreading your influence on the board, you're building churches, you are collecting all these little bonus tokens and stringing them together to make really powerful actions and getting really cool, grandiose turns. And for me, this is it feels like an evergreen to me. I think it's very stripped back. I don't think there's any rules exceptions. You can learn the game pretty quickly and get touched straight into the game. And I think it is an absolute blast. And it really has been consistently climbing the ranks of my personal top 100. So yeah, I absolutely adore this one. I believe we had quite a tight game. I remember us doing generally quite well on all the different public objectives, all the festivals that come out, and kind of traversing the map quite quickly. I think I was really focusing on doing that and building the churches. My opponent was kind of filling up their personal house quite a lot and getting those bonuses. And it was just, a really cool experience. And I really cannot speak of this one highly enough. And I think it is as good as any game out there on the market right now. So that is Teletum. Still loving that one. On to some smaller box card games here. An old one, and one of the actual first card games I had in my collection. This is Battleline by Rainer Knizia. So this is a two-player only, almost like a poker variant, where you are playing 3-card poker hands to compete over these flags, and you are essentially trying to get 3 flags next to each other, or any 5 flags at all. And all you're doing is you're playing a card and drawing a card and so on. But as you go on and on throughout the game, your choices really do start to squeeze and your options do run out quite quickly. And sometimes you are just praying to draw the right card at the right time. One of the tensest games of hand management that I have. There are 2 options to play this game where you can play with these kind of rule-breaking cards. I know some people argue that they're good. For me personally, I think it takes away from the purity of the game. But if you want a cool head-to-head poker variant, tug-of-war style game, then Battleline is just excellent. And I think I lost quite convincingly because I just could not find that opening and get a good formation out there because I just kept on drawing those low cards. But still, an evergreen for me. It's been in my collection for a long time and I still love it. On to a newer two-player only game. This is Wizards of the Grimoire. So recently reviewed this little dueling style game. I've spoken very highly of it and the little engines you can build and the synergies you can obtain in your little tableau here. And for a dueling game, this one feels very Euro and it feels like a kind of efficiency puzzle, I suppose. Now, every game up to this point of Wizards of the Grimoire has come down to like a point or two. In this most recent game, I got absolutely trounced because I could not find any way to draw more mana cards into my hand to keep on casting my spells. So I think I just slowly got worn down and couldn't compete long term. But still, this is a really cool game. And if you haven't watched my review, I always say I'm not generally a big fan of dueling games, but this is a huge exception. And even if you don't like dueling games, and you do like games like Res Arcana, then I'd highly recommend looking into this one because it's very smart. That is Wizards of the Grimoire. Another small box card game before we get into the bigger box games is Royal Realms. So I played a 3-player game of this unknown game, really. It's come out just this year by a very small publisher. This is their first game. The publishing company is called Hobby Doctor, and you can get this game from their website. But this game is very similar to a game like High Society, where you are using these fixed bid cards to acquire these gem cards. And you're basically trying to build rows and columns of certain types of gems to get more and more points. But there's just a few little twists in this game that make it pretty interesting. First off, in the kind of first half of the game, if you're not keeping up with the other players, as in bidding as much as them, then you can potentially just waste a lot of money because some money gets taken out of your hand without your choice. And then after that, you have to start trying to stash away money in order to try and obtain these wild cards. But of course, the more money you're stashing away means the less money you're going to have to bid on the actual cards themselves. And there's even a punishment for spending the most money and a reward for spending the least money. So, those things probably sound quite Knizia in the way they work, and that definitely is the case. But it does definitely feel different enough to a game like High Society. And I should be ready to record my review of this one pretty soon. But it's a lovely game. I did rate it quite highly on my recent my 10 games ranked series, and this one definitely is being massively overlooked. And I really do wish the publisher the best with this one because they've made a nice little game here. So that is Royal Realms. Okay, so let's get into some of the Euros. So I played a 2-player game in the Year of the Dragon. Now, this game over the years, despite being so different to a lot of the other Stefan Feld designs, because he's normally known for his point salad games. This one is the polar opposite. Getting points from this game is very difficult. But this one has probably been one of the most steady in terms of pushing up in terms of my personal ratings. It's always just climbing spots. And I think it's even broken into my top 30 now. This game is so different to anything else out there, as you are trying to weather so many storms by trying to fight off these threats that you know they're happening, but it's all about trying to get the right staff members to deal with those catastrophes at the right time, knowing when to ditch these cars, knowing when to keep them on, and it's all about the pacing on how these different events come up. It almost works like a worker placement game in the action you're selecting, but they come in these groups, so turn order is so important, because if you are first player, you get to choose any action you want. If you go after that, you can't choose any action, but you are going to have to pay quite a heavy fee, and that can be quite crippling because some of the events require you to spend so much money. So everything in this game, it does put you under a lot of pressure. It is kind of, if you're a glutton for punishment, you are going to like this game, but it really is about trying to weather the storm, and it's a game of attrition, trying to do your best, and I just love it. I think it is just so wonderful, and again, it feels so different to anything else out there. And another game where I believe I taught this to someone for the second time. They had learned it before, but it had been quite a while. And they said to me, this game is fantastic, even though I wasn't really expecting them to. So really nice that this one went down well, despite being not overly a pleasant game to play, but a really rewarding game nonetheless. So that is In the Year of the Dragon. On to more kind of strange and punishing games. This is Tigris and Euphrates. So this is I think it's the first time I've played a 2-player game of this, just because it had been quite a while before I got this one to the table since last time. This is another Reiner Knizia game where you are placing tiles onto this board and collecting different tokens of different colours, but only your colour basically your worst colour out of the 4 types is your final score. So you have to keep them as balanced as possible. You are building up this big network, and then you are eventually trying to either kick people out of these kingdoms or even combine them together to make a massive war where lots of things will be resolved. Now, I was trying to stir the pot a bit in this one because we were both kind of doing our own thing. I thought, I'm falling behind a little bit because my opponent had so many of the temples which were just generating these points and without even doing work. So I thought, I have to take action or I'm going to fail. So I took action, and then every single kind of revolt I tried to perform was just repelled. And I could not get in there and steal those temples. But, really nice to get this one back to the table. I think it's pretty easy to play, actually, despite being difficult in the way that it clicks. It's a very strange game in the sense, a bit like In the Year of the Dragon. There's nothing else quite like it out there. And it does take a few plays and a bit getting used to it to really understand how everything fits together. But I find this game very fascinating, and I'm intrigued about the way it works. And that's what keeps me coming back to it, because it's not one of those games that's, overtly fun and just breezy and just, enjoyable to play. It's just something about it that's abstract but very calculated and just different. So that's why I like Tigris and Euphrates so much. On to some more classic Euros with Hansa to Tonica. I played the base map again, despite this one being the big box version. We played a 3-player game, very tight on one side of the board through the whole game here, as you're trying to establish these roads, I suppose, these routes between these different locations. And then you are either kind of boosting your engine in order to do things much more efficiently, like having more actions or taking more cubes into your hand quicker, all these different things. Or you can actually put some presence down on the map in order to start generating new points if people do go to these routes again. Also building a network. And that network mechanism is what set me apart from my opponents in this one, because it was very tight back and forth. In fact, one of my opponents was really doing well because we kept on gifting them points because they kept on establishing the trade posts, and we kept on just giving them points by doing those routes again. But what I managed to do was build quite a healthy network of connecting cities and then increase the points output by this key mechanism, which is kind of one of the engines you can build. Whereas both of my opponents didn't do that, I did do that, and that's what kind of gave me double the points in that category that they got. So that was a difference maker in this one. But very competitive, very interactive, pretty mean at times, but you're not being mean for no reason, because if you are mean to somebody and block their route, you actually get rewarded by them kicking you back off by having much more exposure and being able to spread your cubes much quicker on the board. But an absolute downright classic, Hansa to Tonica, one of the best games ever made. Now on to a game that's pretty strange. One that I haven't talked about too much, but it did, again, another game that ranked quite well semi-recently on my 10 games ranked series. This is Syria. This is from the Istari line, which I'm generally a fan of. Now, this game, I think I'm ready to review it, so keep an eye out for that one. But this is definitely an underrated jam. You don't hear anybody talking about this game, and it's quite special in the way it works, because it is almost area control as you are kind of putting your huts down on the board, but you have to keep constantly playing these resources to keep them on the board. So once you actually establish something on the board, it's not necessarily staying there unless you keep paying for it. And you're doing that for a number of different reasons. So you're trying to create these kind of three-way kind of, a triangle of these hexes to generate these wells, which give you instant points. You are building these ziggurats, which will give you kind of ticking points in terms of generating points, and new spawning points to put stuff onto the board. You're putting your huts onto the rivers to generate these camels, which will add towards lots of different things you can do, such as building new ziggurats or doing another kind of separate area majority part of the game. And it just has so many different paths to victory. But I do love that idea of most efficiently spending the cards, and I love how important turn order is in this game. And I'll talk about that more in the review. But again, if you like Istari games and you like those classic throwback German Euros, then this one is a really good one to cast your eye upon and do a bit of research on, because again, it's different to anything else out there. Now, the game we had, again, we went very different routes here. I was really focusing on generating quite a few points from my ziggurats and even increasing these end of round multipliers by getting quite a few points for every ziggurat site you have. Whereas my opponents were kind of trying to get the majorities of these cards that come out. And, all the different things we're dipping our toes into. But it was quite cool that it came down to a very close game. I can't even remember who won it. I enjoyed it that much. But yeah, this one is it's a lovely game. A little bit procedural at times, but it's definitely more than worth it. Once those rules click, the game is a hell of a lot of fun. So that is Syria. Back to a smaller box game here. I think we played a quick 2-player game just to finish the games day off of Rustling Leaves. Lovely little roll and write game as you are basically filling these sheets up by drawing these square grids on there, depending what's rolled on a dice, and then ticking different symbols off to get set collected bonuses and lots of different ways to score points. Really like this one. Spoken about it quite a bit over the years, and I'm still going strong. If you definitely do want a 15-minute, very quick to set up game, then Rustling Leaves is a great option. And penultimately, in fact not penultimately, this is My Farm Shop. So this is another game I've spoken highly of over the years. I spoke about how this one I feel is a much more satisfying game than something like Space, despite having very similar mechanisms as you're rolling dice and triggering different cards that you built up on your little tableau. But this one, I love how you're interacting with the other players all the time, because all you're doing is you're rolling 3 dice. One of them is going to show which card you collect and add onto your player board, and the other 2 are going to show which action spot is activated, and that can generate your resource or let you convert resources into coins, which is essentially your points. That's the entire game, but it has a lovely flow to it. It's nice and fast. It's cool when you can make a nice little tableau that works together. And I just enjoy it. There's something about it for a family weight, very accessible game. This one ticks a lot of boxes for me. And you know, I wasn't really expecting that when I first played it. And another very tight game. It actually came down to, in fact, it was a draw. It was a draw. So we actually broke down to the 2 tiebreakers, and we still ended up tying the game. It was that close. And yeah, I really like this one. One of those games that I'd never really turn down because I find it quite charming and a lot of fun. Penultimately, I played a 2-player game of Nauticus by Kramer and Kiesling. Now, this is a game I don't have in my own collection, but a friend of mine has it, and it's a game I actually really enjoy. I mean, the more I play this, the more I like it. It kind of reminds me of Shipyard, and it actually has a almost identical theme to Shipyard as you're building ships. Of course, you need the front part, the back part, the middle part. Bigger ships means more points. Smaller ships means you're going to get more bonuses. And I love this action selection system, as when you select an action, everybody gets to take the action, but the person selecting it gets a boost, such as getting more workers or getting like free masts and things like this. And I love that mechanism, you know, where you're always engaged in the game. And this game also has this very small part of the game where you can actually pass on your turn and flip over these negative point tokens, because if you don't do that, you actually end up generating negative points. So by default, you start with negative points, and you have to sacrifice actions to flip them over and not suffer those negative points, which is really cool because you have to know when to seize that opportunity in order to do that. But for a Kramer and Kiesling game, this one is, you know, nobody talks about it. It is fantastic. You can probably find a cheap second-hand copy out there. And, you know, if my friend didn't have it, I would buy this one straight away because I think it is a great game. So that is Nauticus. And finally, we're going to end with a big boy here with Mosaic. So I played a 3-player game of Mosaic, and this was definitely a different style of Mosaic that I've played before, because in the other games I've played of Mosaic, the military part of the game was kind of ignored. You know, that was a very minor part. It wasn't swaying much. But in this one of my opponents had the military faction, which meant they could put military units on the board a lot quicker than anybody else could. And rightly so, they utilised that power and were spamming the board with military units very early in the game. So whenever it came to an empire scoring, they were just mopping up points. Now, I don't think that quite paid off in the end because other things were being neglected a bit too much, but it was nice to see a different approach to the game. And if you don't know what Mosaic is, it's a very accessible civilization game, as you are acquiring tons of cards which will increase your production to do things, you know, your ability to produce resources quicker, to build buildings. You are getting coverage of the board and collecting tokens. You can compete militarily. You can do so many different things in this game, and there's loads of public objectives to go for. Now, I kind of struggled to manage a lot in this game. Now, I wasn't too far behind, but I did lose the game. And one of my opponents is actually very good at this game. I've played with this with him each time I've played it, and he seems to be very good at being efficient and being able to claim lots of objectives very quickly and string them together, where I'm kind of struggling in that department. But I think this is kind of ticks all the boxes for me for what I wanted from a civilization game. And I think it's one of the best games of 2022 for sure. And it would be in my top 10 of the year for last year, no doubt about that. And it's nice to see that it's still going strong, because most of these Civ games, I enjoy them, but they do have a shorter shelf life, because I feel like once you've seen all the different avenues, you've seen all the cards, I'm ready to move on. But this one, I'm still keen to play it some more, because it is actually relatively quick to play. The setup is a bit of a bugbear, or a bit of a burden, but I think the gameplay ultimately is worth it. So that is Mosaic. And that's it. That's all the games that I've been playing over the last couple of weeks. It's been a really good couple of weeks of gaming. I've kind of played mostly of my old favourite games rather than playing new stuff. And I probably need to start going back to playing some new stuff, because I have stuff building up. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.